I still remember every detail of that morning at JFK International Airport. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I stood there, my suitcase at my feet, watching my in-laws' faces twist with barely concealed contempt. My husband Mark stood beside them, avoiding my eyes like a coward. "This trip isn't for you, Sarah," my mother-in-law Catherine announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness that anyone within earshot could detect. She adjusted her designer sunglasses and glanced at her husband Robert, who nodded in agreement. "This is a family trip. A real family trip." I felt my stomach drop. We had planned this vacation to the Maldives for 6 months. I had requested time off work, bought new clothes, and even learned a few phrases in Divahai. Mark and I had been married for 3 years, and I thought I was part of this family. Apparently, I was wrong. "Mark." I turned to my husband, searching his face for some sign that he would stand up for me. Instead, he shifted uncomfortably and mumbled something about, "Maybe it's better this way," and, "We need some family bonding time." Family bonding time. Without his wife. The words hit me like a physical blow. Catherine continued, her voice now loud enough for other travelers to hear. "You know, dear, you've never really fit in with our lifestyle anyway. This resort requires a certain class, a certain breeding. Robert's golf partners will be there with their wives, and well, we need to make the right impression." The humiliation burned through me. Other passengers were staring now. Some looked sympathetic, others merely curious about the drama unfolding at Gate 47. An elderly woman catching her flight to Miami shook her head disapprovingly at my in-laws, but that small gesture of solidarity did little to ease my pain. "But I already paid for half of this trip," I said quietly, trying to maintain my dignity even as tears threatened to spill. "The resort, the flights, the activities." "Oh, we'll reimburse you eventually," Robert waved his hand dismissively, as if money could fix this betrayal. "Consider it a loan to the family. You understand." No. I didn't understand. What I understood was that my husband was boarding a plane to paradise with his parents, while leaving his wife standing alone in an airport terminal like discarded luggage. Mark finally looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw guilt flash across his face. But then his mother linked her arm through his, and just like that, he turned away. They walked toward the boarding gate, their expensive luggage rolling smoothly behind them. Catherine's laughter echoed through the terminal as she said something I couldn't quite hear, but I caught Mark's weak chuckle in response. I stood there frozen for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The gate agent called for final boarding. Through the window, I could see their plane, massive and gleaming, ready to carry my husband and his family to a tropical paradise while I remained behind like Cinderella after midnight. As I watched the plane taxi down the runway, something inside me crystallized. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It wasn't just hurt, though my heart felt like it had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. It was clarity. Crystal clear. Ice-cold clarity. I pulled out my phone and made the first call. Then the second. Then the third. By the time I left that airport, I had made 17 calls total. Some to lawyers. Some to my bank. Some to people my in-laws had wronged over the years who I knew would be very interested in certain information I possessed. You see, what Catherine and Robert didn't know was that I wasn't just Mark's wife. I was also the person who had been quietly managing Mark's entire life for the past 3 years. I knew every password, every account number, every dirty little secret. Mark was terrible with organization and paperwork, so I had taken over everything. His finances, his business dealings, his investments, even his parents' anniversary party planning. And I had been paying attention. Very close attention. The first 3 days after the airport incident, I moved with surgical precision. While Mark and his parents sipped cocktails on white sand beaches, posting enviable photos on social media with captions like, "Family is everything," and "Paradise with my favorite people," I was methodically dismantling the life they thought was secure. I started with the small things. I cancelled the premium cable subscription that Robert insisted on having at his house, the one I had been paying for because Mark said it was easier to keep it on our credit card. I removed my name from every joint utility account, every shared subscription service, every membership that had somehow become my financial responsibility over the years. Then I moved to the moderate things. I called the country club where Catherine loved to play tennis and informed them that the membership fee Mark had been paying, again, from our joint account, would no longer be honored. I contacted the luxury car dealership where Robert had leased his Mercedes and explained that I would no longer be the co-signer on the loan. That had been a temporary arrangement 3 years ago that had somehow become permanent. I documented everything. Every payment I had made to support my in-laws' lifestyle. Every loan that had never been repaid. Every favor that had become an obligation. The numbers were staggering. Over the course of our marriage, I had funneled nearly $89,000 of my own money into propping up the facade of the wealthy, classy family that Catherine and Robert presented to the world. The truth was that Robert had lost most of his money in bad investments 5 years ago. Mark's business was barely profitable. They were living on credit, appearance, and my salary as a software engineer. I was the golden goose, and they had just told me I wasn't good enough to fly with them to the Maldives. On day 4, I visited my lawyer, Jennifer Chen, a sharp woman in her 40s who listened to my story with increasing interest. She had built her reputation on complex divorce cases, and after I finished explaining the situation, she leaned back in her leather chair and smiled. "Sarah, I'm going to be honest with you," she said. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've seen in a long time. Not only do we have financial abuse, but we have documentation of your contributions to marital property, separate documentation of expenditures you made under duress, and a pattern of emotional manipulation. New York is an equitable distribution state, which means I'm entitled to far more than half," I finished for her. I had done my research during those 3 sleepless nights. Jennifer nodded approvingly. "You've been paying attention. There's also the matter of your in-laws. Did you know that co-signing on a loan and then having someone fraudulently continue to use your financial backing without your ongoing consent has legal ramifications?" I didn't, but I was learning quickly. On day 6, while Mark was posting a photo of himself snorkeling with sea turtles, I received a call from an old college friend named David. He worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I had reached out to him earlier in the week about some suspicious stock transactions I had noticed in Robert's portfolio. "Sarah, you were right to flag this," David said, his voice serious. "The pattern you identified matches a classic case of insider trading. I can't go into details, but let's just say Robert's golf buddy connections aren't as innocent as they appear. We're opening an investigation." I had suspected as much. Robert had always bragged about his market timing and his gut instincts, but I had noticed that his successful trades always seemed to coincide with major corporate announcements. When you have access to someone's complete financial records, patterns become visible. By day 7, I had moved out of our apartment and into a beautiful loft downtown. I took only what was mine: my clothes, my books, my laptop, and the antique writing desk my grandmother had left me. I left Mark's things untouched. I even left a note on the kitchen counter: "Enjoying your family time. We need to talk when you return." The note was deliberately calm, deliberately restrained. I wanted him to think I was hurt but passive, waiting for his return so we could work things out. The reality was very different. I spent that week also reaching out to every person my in-laws had snubbed, insulted, or wronged over the years. Mark's brother Tom, who had been disinherited because he married someone Catherine considered beneath the family. Catherine's former best friend Linda, who had been dropped when she lost her husband's money in the divorce. Robert's former business partner James, who had been pushed out of their company through shady dealings. Each conversation revealed new layers of cruelty, new victims of the family's social climbing and manipulation. And each person was very interested when I mentioned that I had documentation of various activities they might find useful. Tom was particularly helpful. As it turned out, being disinherited by Robert and Catherine had freed him to tell the truth about the family. He knew about offshore accounts I hadn't discovered. He knew about fake appraisals on the family's valuable art collection. He knew that the beach house Catherine loved to show off in photos was actually underwater in terms of its mortgage. They're broke, Sarah, Tom told me over coffee at a small cafe in Brooklyn. They've been broke for years. My brother Mark is so desperate to maintain their approval that he can't see he's drowning trying to keep them afloat. Not anymore, I said quietly. The lifeboat just left the harbor. Day 12. That was when Mark, Catherine, and Robert finally returned from their family trip. I know this because I had been monitoring their social media accounts, watching as their blissful vacation posts slowly shifted in tone. The first hint of trouble came on day 9, when Robert posted a confused message about his credit card being declined at the resort restaurant. Catherine had brushed it off with a joke about banking errors. By day 10, there were no more posts. By day 11, according to the resort staff member I had befriended over the phone, they were having heated arguments in the lobby about payment for their room. I had frozen the joint credit cards. All of them. Legally, methodically, and with full documentation explaining why. The cards were in my name as the primary account holder, something Mark had agreed to years ago when his credit score was too low to qualify for premium cards. I had been building his credit, managing his debt, keeping him afloat. Not anymore. When they finally landed at JFK on that Tuesday afternoon, I was waiting. Not at the airport. I had far more dignity than that. I was waiting in my lawyer's office, with Jennifer Chen beside me and a conference room full of documents that represented 3 years of financial abuse. Mark called me 17 times during their journey from the airport to our apartment. I didn't answer. He texted me 34 times, his messages growing increasingly frantic. Where are you? Why aren't you home? What did you do with the credit cards? My parents are furious. Call me now. I responded with a single text. I'm at 425 Park Avenue, Suite 1200. Your presence is required. 2 hours later, Mark walked into that conference room, his face sunburned and exhausted. Catherine and Robert flanked him, their vacation glow already fading into something harder, more desperate. They looked at me sitting calmly at the conference table, papers spread before me like a general's battle plans. What is this? Catherine demanded, her voice shrill. What kind of dramatic nonsense? Sit down, Jennifer said firmly, her tone brooking no argument. All of you. They sat. For the first time in 3 years, I watched my in-laws follow someone else's orders. Jennifer began. My client, Sarah Mitchell, has retained my services to pursue divorce from Mark Mitchell on the grounds of abandonment, emotional cruelty, and financial abuse. We are also exploring legal action against Catherine and Robert Mitchell for fraud, exploitation, and misappropriation of funds. The color drained from Robert's face. Catherine opened her mouth to protest, but Jennifer held up her hand. Let me be very clear about the evidence we have compiled, Jennifer continued, sliding folders across the table to each of them. Sarah has documented every payment she has made on your behalf over the past 3 years. The country club membership, Sarah's money. The car lease, Sarah's co-signature and payments when you defaulted. The credit cards you've been using, Sarah's accounts. The resort you just stayed at in the Maldives, Sarah's money funded 50% of that trip that she was told she couldn't attend. I watched Mark flip through the folder, his hands shaking. He hadn't realized. He genuinely hadn't realized how much of his life I had been funding, managing, supporting. Or maybe he had known but hadn't wanted to acknowledge it. This is ridiculous, Catherine sputtered. She's family. Family helps each other. That's what marriage means. Marriage means partnership. I spoke for the first time, my voice steady and cold. It means respect. It means not abandoning your wife at an airport and telling her she isn't good enough to go on a family vacation that she helped pay for. Sarah, come on. Mark finally found his voice. It was just one trip. My parents thought it would be good for us to have some space. Space. I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. Mark, I've had 12 days of space. 12 days to look at our marriage clearly for the first time. 12 days to see exactly how much I've sacrificed for a family that sees me as nothing more than an ATM machine with a heartbeat. Jennifer took over again. Here's what's going to happen. Sarah is filing for divorce. Given the circumstances, we are seeking an equitable distribution heavily weighted in Sarah's favor, including repayment of all funds she contributed to the marital estate that benefited the Mitchell family exclusively. You can't do this, Robert said weakly. Actually, we can, Jennifer replied. We also need to discuss the SEC investigation into your trading activities, Robert, and the matter of fraudulent appraisals on your art collection used to secure loans, and the offshore accounts that were never disclosed in estate planning documents. The room went silent. Robert's face was now completely grey. Catherine looked like she might be sick. Mark just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. How? He whispered. How do you know all of this? Because I paid attention, Mark, I said. For 3 years, I organized your life, managed your finances, planned your parents' parties, and kept your family's secrets. I knew where every body was buried because I was the one maintaining the cemetery. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I have one offer to make, and it's non-negotiable. You sign the divorce papers with the settlement terms we've outlined. You agree to repayment terms for the money I've contributed to your parents' lifestyle. And in exchange, I don't pursue criminal charges for the fraud I could easily prove. This is extortion, Catherine hissed. No, Jennifer corrected her. This is a settlement offer. Extortion would be if Sarah threatened to reveal your financial crimes unless you paid her. She's simply offering you a choice. Settle civilly and repay what's owed, or face criminal prosecution and civil lawsuits. Your choice. I gathered my purse and walked to the door. Before I left, I turned back one final time. You know what the truly ironic thing is? I actually loved you, Mark. I loved your family, despite their flaws. I worked so hard to be accepted, to be considered worthy of the Mitchell name. And that day at the airport, when your mother said I didn't have the breeding or class for your family trip, something finally became clear to me. I paused, making sure Mark was looking directly at me. I was never the one lacking class. It was all of you. True class isn't about money or country clubs or resort vacations. It's about integrity, loyalty, and treating people with basic human decency. You failed on every count. The door clicked shut behind me, and I walked out of that building into the cool New York evening. My phone buzzed immediately. Mark calling again. I silenced it and kept walking. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Mark signed everything without contest. His parents, facing the SEC investigation and potential criminal charges, settled out of court, agreeing to a payment plan that would take them years to complete. The beach house was sold. Catherine's jewelry collection, most of it costume pieces with fake appraisals, was liquidated. Robert's golf club membership was terminated. The family that had told me I wasn't good enough for their vacation was systematically dismantled by the woman they had underestimated. I heard through Tom that Mark moved back in with his parents, the 3 of them now living in a modest apartment in Queens, a far cry from their former pretensions. Catherine no longer posts on social media. Robert's golf buddies have all disappeared. The investigation is ongoing. As for me, I took the settlement money and made a down payment on a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn. I got a promotion at work. Turns out I had a lot more energy for my career when I wasn't managing 3 other adults' lives. I started dating again, carefully and on my own terms. But the best part, the sweetest revenge of all, came 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I booked a trip to the Maldives. First-class tickets, the most expensive resort on the island, every luxury package available. I went alone, gloriously and completely alone. On the first morning, I sat on the private beach attached to my overwater villa, sipping champagne and watching the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. My phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. Robert's trading case is moving forward. Catherine's country club friends have all distanced themselves. Mark asked if you'd consider coffee to talk. What should I tell him? I typed back. Tell him I'm on vacation. This trip is just for me. Then I silenced my phone, leaned back in my chair, and smiled at the crystal clear water. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply living well, knowing your worth, and refusing to let anyone make you feel small ever again. The elderly woman from Gate 47 that day was right to shake her head at my in-laws. They had made a critical miscalculation. They thought they were discarding someone weak, someone who would cry and accept her dismissal. They were wrong. They had discarded someone who was watching, learning, and documenting every single mistake they made. And in the end, that made all the difference. As I waded into the warm Maldivian water, I thought about that version of myself standing in the airport, humiliated and heartbroken. If I could go back and whisper one thing to her, it would be this. Hold on. Your moment is coming. And it will be so much sweeter than you can imagine. The water was perfect. The sky was endless. And for the first time in 3 years, I was exactly where I belonged. In a paradise I had earned, surrounded by the peace that comes from knowing your own worth. That's the thing about silent revenge. It doesn't need to be loud to be devastating. It just needs to be thorough, strategic, and completely, utterly justified. And mine was all three.